You are listening to the Firecracker Podcast with Tony Rico.
All right. Hello, softball sports fans. We are here. I've got a couple different ways that I can lead into this, but I thought about this. So we are here with Courtney Blades. Courtney Blades Rogers, one of the greatest pitchers in the history of softball. And Courtney, I just thought I'd kind of come out of left field with that and surprise you with that I could start with that you're Britton Rogers' mom and you're a Firecracker coach and mom, and you have that background because that's really how we have met each other. But I'm going to start with apologizing to our organization. I feel an apology to you, but it's indirect of, my gosh, we have one of the greatest pitchers of all time in our organization, or, with your family in it, and to not dive into the story just a little bit, because this isn't about you, it's about pitching. But how do we talk about pitching without starting with the fact that, my gosh, Court, and so I'm going to ask you a question. Did Lou Harris recruit you out of high school? So did you originally went to Nicholls State, and was Lou the coach there?
Yes. Lou Harris recruited me out of high school, and oddly enough, as successful as I was at the end, I was just one of those kids that was good on the field, and she happened to find me. I was close to home. I had some friends that were already on the team. So yeah, she came and found me actually in Texas at a tournament in Texas. So that's how I got kind of hooked up with her. Yeah.
And your first year, you set an NCAA record with almost 500 strikeouts, right? So 497 Ks your first year with 3 no-nos and a perfect game. Right. And then we'll fast forward. And then you take them to the world. Well, okay, but the team goes to the World Series in 1999. I assume the first time for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So after I transferred from Nicholls to Southern Miss my junior year. So Southern Miss, we went to World Series first time.
And you went with Coach Lou. So she had taken the job at Southern Miss. So you finished up at Southern Miss, and then World Series in 1999. 2000, you're the National Pitcher of the Year. You're the MVP, USA MVP, and the Honda Award winner, which I knew of that. That's a very prestigious award because that's all sports, right? Females and males in sports. 4 more no-nos and 2 more perfect games, I believe, in your last year. Your second perfect game against Arizona in the College World Series, which at that time, and anyone that knows the history, Arizona was always the toughest offense, or one of the toughest offenses in the country. So to have that success against them, I mean, this body of work, Courtney, is ridiculous. You took Southern Miss to third place. So College World Series at third place. And I believe do I have it right? The game that you beat Arizona, was that the first game of the series? Was that your first game?
Yes, that was our first game, night game.
So you knocked them into the wrong side of things, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was bittersweet. We had played them earlier in the season, and they pretty much stomped us at their field. So, yeah.
Which again, is a tough place to play. So I got a couple more things to roll through here because, my goodness. So first pitcher to break 500 and 600 strikeouts in a season. So those are career numbers. So 500 in one season, 600 in another season. You finish with 151 career wins. 151 career wins. Your senior year, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You got your own Wikipedia. Give me a break. So you're 52 and 7 your senior year. You didn't know you were going to get embarrassed like this.
No, I didn't.
2 and 7. Someone would question if that was abuse towards a pitcher, but that's ridiculous. You're averaging almost 33 wins a season. 130 win season is a benchmark for pitchers, and you averaged 33 in your 4 years. You had an 18 strikeout game. You had a 21 strikeout game in a 13 inning game. And Courtney, this body of work sits alone just by itself. And the reason that it's so significant to me is because I think that I feel the most pain in my heart for pitchers in this game today. I just my opinion, I feel like they're the most vulnerable on the field. And to so few of them so few people in period experience this type of dominance, but experience the what it's like to be successful in the circle. So whether it's winning or how you carry yourself or have the stuff or whatever it is. And so into that phrase that I talk about, you know how to pitch, but do you know how to pitch? Okay, you know how to pitch. Your pitchers on your team know how to pitch, but do they know how to win? do they win because you've called a great game? Do they win because their coaches have put everything around them and they execute? Because there's those types of pitchers. Not every pitcher has to have that unique something that I'm going to just say in my experience with you. We already know you have that, and we want to talk about that. But that is special, Courtney. And so I want to I have to create the entrance with that body of work and say, wow, it's our responsibility to make sure that sits in a pocket. It's kind of like doing a podcast with Natasha Watley a few months ago, and Natasha being one of the best slappers ever. And I feel that it's the sports responsibility to keep her relevant in some sense. And I feel like that's with players like yourself as well. So thank you for spending time with me this morning. And really, so we want to parlay that into kind of helping our pitchers and just talking about pitching in general. So the first question I have for you is, because now you're looking at these strikeout numbers, right? And strikeout numbers, if you look at even like the top 5 or top 10 all-time strikeout leaders, it seems like they all have predominantly 1 or 2 or 3 certain types of pitches. But I would ask you, what was your bread and butter? Like, what did you get it done with? I mean, that's a lot of accolades for a lot of years. And so what was your bread and butter?
Well, I get asked this question a lot, and I think I actually had 2, and I think it's kind of a combination that I think a lot of people forget about, or maybe don't have, or don't think about. But I had a really good rise, and I had a really good change. And the changeup is the pitch that made the difference between freshman, sophomore year, and junior, senior year. And by the way, all those numbers, thank you for reminding me of all those. I don't look at all that kind of stuff. I really don't. I just know that when you put the work in, stuff, those type of numbers are going to come sometimes. But pitch-wise, rise ball, changeup were my pitches. And everybody knew it.
Between your sophomore and junior year, what happened with the change? Was it the development, how you're using it? Like, what happened specifically?
Yeah, I think so. I went in as a freshman thinking, okay, I'm a really good pitcher. I know what I'm doing. And then when you get to college, not so much. You still have a lot to learn. And I had a change up and I had a rise ball those first 2 years. I mean, I played UL, which was at that moment USL, now is ULL. I played them as a freshman and struck a bunch of them out with a rise ball. But between sophomore year and junior year, I developed a different kind of change up. And it took about 6 months or so to figure that pitch out. But once it showed up, oh my goodness, the difference it made. So I went from throwing, I don't even really know what it was, to throwing a flip change, or what some people call a backhand change. And it was difference maker, big time.
And what was it that made that difference? Was it the arm speed, the trajectory, the speed of the pitch, the keeping it low? Like, what was the difference in the delivery of the pitch that made such a difference in full and battle?
The delivery of the pitch was exactly the same. So it looked it looked just like everything else. And I've watched Nairi White do her podcast with you, and I loved it because she said it has to look exactly the same. And that's 100% correct. It has to look exactly the same, because if it doesn't, I think our hitters and our technology nowadays is too good to not be able to pick that kind of stuff up. But the trajectory of the ball was down. It came out of my hand flat. And sometimes it would break down. I know how to dirty the pitch. I could put it in the ground with 2 strikes. So a lot of that had to do with mental stuff. But the physical side, it looked exactly like everything else. And even if you knew it was coming, it was still hard to hit. So it was great.
You and I have had good conversations about, even in our experiences. For me, when I'm in the third base box, the toughest pitchers for us historically to score runs against have been the pitchers that have the rise ball and changeup combination. We have to be more creative. We have to sit on either one pocket or the other, because they're 2 different attack points,
right,
as far as what we're trying to do. And so, but I started to see that disappear. And you were pitching at 43 feet.
Yeah, I was at 43 feet in college. Prior to that, travel ball was all 40 feet.
So now at college, and again, being a dominant power type pitcher, but that extra 3 feet, right, is a big difference to the batter. So big difference. I've seen a lot of pitchers compromise because they can't get the ball back here on the batter because they're 3 feet farther back, and the batters are able to get their bat hit out. Especially right now with all the lawn stuff, it's like getting out here and driving things. So that's also impressive. The fact that throwing at that distance and you still have that strikeout capacity, those numbers didn't diminish. I mean, they increased, and that's impressive as well too. So do you contribute that to when you were developing? Were you power minded? Were you someone that liked to throw hard? Like when you first started pitching, and what age was that? 6, 8, 10, 12? When did it start?
This is funny. I actually was a catcher to start, Everybody wants to catch or pitch. So I was a catcher, got hit in the arm reaching for the ball twice in the same game with the bat in the elbow. The very next week, I was on the mound pitching. Never had a pitching lesson, anything. So I was actually 10 the first time I ever put my arm in. Well, we actually did slingshot back then to start.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm aging myself here, but but yeah, we went slingshot and then windmill within the same year. But still, I was 10 when I started, so probably about average for where kids are starting these days. Although I think a lot of kids are starting younger. But we were 40 feet, big ball the whole time. I never pitched at 35. I never pitched with a small ball. None of those things. And then the first time I moved back to 43 was my freshman year in college.
So when you first started, did you have a niche for it? Did you have a love for it? Was it something that you kind of naturally excelled at? But you're like, look, Tony, after that, I'd go out and I'd either ride horses or do other stuff. Or where did it sit in your interest? Was it something that you really attached to or once you started it?
I think softball in general was what I liked. And I don't know, at that age, it's hard for me to remember right now. But I do know that I liked having the ball in my hand every single time. So the minute I became a pitcher, I didn't look back. I never wanted to play another position. I had to play outfield in college a little bit, which was horrible for me because I hated playing outfield. But I did it so I could hit. But pitching was my thing. And I just think it was, I don't know, my parents weren't super big athletes. They played, but it was my thing. The minute I hit the field and I was in the circle, that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted the ball. I wanted the ball every single time. So I guess maybe I was born that way because my coaches weren't, beating it into my head that you have to be the best. They didn't do that. My team practiced a lot and we only played in the summer. But other than that, and I'll tell everybody this, I didn't practice. I wasn't year round like the kids are now. So when I hit the field with 100% every time. So
it was when you would work on your own, how did you develop? Did you start on your own? Did you mimic? Did you see anybody? Like when you first started, where do you credit your development to and kind of phasing into the type of style that you learned as far as whether it was coaching or how did you develop? Tell me about that.
So when I started, there was a organization in Louisiana. They're still around. It's called the Louisiana Patriots. And they had I guess it was what we would call now their president. But he was the owner of it. They had a facility. I started with group lessons. We had about 10 kids in a group. And that's where the fundamentals came from. And it was crazy. I really think the lessons were like $10 for an hour. And he had 10 kids in there. And we just kind of went through it, more like what you would call a camp nowadays. We didn't really do private lessons back then. So there was a lot of working on your own. I'd go to the group lessons once a week. As I got older, so I say older, I guess more like 14s or so, I would come over to Houston about once every 6 weeks or so. And I couldn't tell you the guy's name who I saw, but that's who I got all my spinny stuff from. So I'd see him once a weekend for every 6 weeks, and then I'd go home and work on my own. So, but we didn't have YouTube and we didn't have all of that stuff. So I guess, I developed on my own and I practiced a lot with my team. I wasn't one of those kids where you could find in the yard every single day. That wasn't me. I was swimming, riding my bike, all those kinds of things. But I watched a ton of softball. When I had the opportunity, I would go. LSU didn't have a team at that point, but USL did, and Coach Gerard was the coach there, Coach Yvette. So I'd go and watch them. And my mom tells me all the time, I never left the ballpark. So I would go to the ball field and watch if I wasn't playing. So I guess that's where it came from. And I'm a big believer, even to this day, that if you were to line up all of my pictures, nobody looks exactly the same. So I think I kind of developed my own sense of style by watching different people and figuring out what I liked more than what I felt was right, because I didn't know. I was just kind of doing it. And, it worked in the games and the competitive side. We always played really good competition. So that helped. But as far as
influenced you, Courtney, who you say you watched softball. So were there certain pitchers that influenced you?
Well, obviously I watched Lisa Fernandez. She's not that much older than I am, but so as I got older, she was old enough to where that type of stuff was on TV and, they were doing games and stuff. So she's really the person that I watched the most. She was so dominant. And looking back on it now, I didn't throw hard. I threw like 64. I topped out at 67, but you would never catch me throwing 67 in a game. I think I hit that once in a game. So I cruised around 64. Actually, I was at a tournament this past summer, or maybe this past fall, and Coach Walton came up to me, and at that point he was at Oklahoma, and we were talking about, back in the day, and he said, yeah, you didn't blaze it by us, but we looked for the arm slot on your rise ball, and that's what we were looking for, because it wasn't because you were blowing it by us, it's because you were spinning it past us. So just pitchers in general, I just kind of watched pitchers in general, but Lisa Fernandez was so dominant on the mound, and her demeanor on the mound is more or less what I was looking at, because she was a great drop ball pitcher at that moment, and I was more rise. So we weren't alike on the physical side, but the way she presented herself on the mound, even when I was younger, it was really, really intriguing to me. So that's kind of how that part got started.
That behavior, even though we're not looking for it, it kind of rubs off on us. We kind of realize what it was later on down the road. We say to our players all the time, nobody looks for behavior when they're recruiting, but everybody notices it, and it rubs off in different ways. So I think that's important.
Absolutely.
So there's a big part of this for me that it's innate. So when you were talking about, I wanted the ball in my hand, right? So as coaches, we know that, look, sometimes you don't know until you put the ball in somebody's hand. It could be a football in somebody's hand, or a softball, or a baseball, or a basketball. And so there's that innate thing that certain people and players have that carry themselves on to success. And that's something special, and I'm sure in the coaching aspect of softball, you see a couple players that have that. But teaching players how to win, right? So there's that natural dominant state, that natural fire, but teaching players how to win, because you can't teach the fire. You're born with that. But you believe it's possible to teach pitchers how to be efficient so that they become more of a winning mindset type pitcher, because do you agree that there's a difference between pitching and thinking about what you need to do and the movements and the mechanics, but then a competitive engagement where you're in a winning mindset, whatever that is? It could be that I want to beat that batter, or it could be that I'm executing this plan of whether it's hitting spots or spinning or whatever it is. So, how do we help more pitchers become winning pitchers?
Well, I think it starts obviously in your bullpen and at your lessons. I know, I'm a pitching instructor, and there are moments where first of all, you're dealing with girls, and you're dealing with girls of a whole bunch of different ages. So we know that there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of hormones running, that type of thing. So I think it's really important for us as instructors to realize and notice, how they're feeling and what they're feeling at that moment. And I can give you an example, a great example. Last night I had a girl come in, and physically she was fine, but I could tell emotionally she was not. So I think those types of things are important to recognize as a coach, as an instructor, as a parent, and help the girls through that type of stuff, because they cannot be successful physically on the mound unless they're in a good state mentally, 100%. And people, you hear people say all the time, well, sports are 90% mental and 10% physical. I agree with that, but I do think that it's more, I think it's a little bit more balanced than that, because you have to be great physically, and before you can get on the mound and think I'm great, but if you can't do it physically, you're not going to get the result you want. So training kids on the mental side as well as the physical side is just as important, and we do that in our lessons. My lessons are 30 minutes or an hour, just depending on their age, but we do both every time they come, every single time. I think it's really, really important.
There's two great takeaways. So again, for the numbers that you put up and the success that you had, and then you can tell pitchers that you weren't the hardest thrower out there, that you weren't blowing it by people, right? Even though we love power, we love the concept of throwing hard, that wasn't necessarily your niche. And I also love the fact that, again, for as dominant as you were and are as a person, that you relate to that emotional side of your pitchers. Most people have heard this too many times, and if you haven't heard it at all, I got this from Coach Mike Kendria. Guys have to play good to feel good. Ladies have to feel good to play good. And so it's a learned behavior for guys. I speak for myself. It took a while. You think you're doing it right. You think you understand, but you don't. And when you understand that, I realized that I needed to give a certain amount of time in my lesson to just talking. But it went against the industry standard. The industry standard was hit for a half hour, throw the pitches. So you look for that in your students, and will you take as much time as you need to address things and talk with them?
Absolutely. So let's just say it's an hour lesson. When they come in, ask them if we're in the middle of playing, which right now is a little bit different. But if we're in the middle of playing, I'll ask them, how are things going? How are things working? And then we will talk about how did you feel when such and such was happening? So a good example would be, you gave up a single, then you gave up a walk. How are you feeling at that point? And so we kind of walk through what they do. Physically, what do you do? What's your routine on the mound? And then what do you do mentally? How do you slow things down in the game to where you can get back to where you need to be and then get to that next pitch? So, and Firecrackers do a great job of talking about, your routine and your breath and that type of thing. We do the same thing at lessons, because I think if you don't practice it at lessons or in your bullpens or wherever it is you're practicing or training, we call it training, wherever it is you're training, then how do you expect that to translate to the field? So we do talk. I think there are some kids that need to throw because they're not getting to throw a lot at home, or they don't have somebody who can catch them, or they don't have a net, or they don't have somebody that can, watch them. So there are definitely kids that will show up and we need to throw for an hour, but in the middle of their throwing while they're taking their water break, we're talking. So I do a lot of, I'm a learner who needs to see things too. So when I'm at lessons, whether it's an hour lesson, 30-minute lesson, whatever it is, I'm up the whole time. So I don't ask them to do things I can't do, although there are some pitches that I teach kids that I can't throw. But I ask them questions, and we make sure that they're feeling it. They understand what they're doing. That way, when they do get to the field, they know what's happening and they know how to correct when they're on the field. So their parents aren't yelling at them.
Right. Well, and it's part of the environment that we are in, right? I think it goes back to what you said. There's a balance. If you spend all your time talking and visualizing and you don't do the physical work, laying it down, so it's a balance. So there might be some times where it's maybe 90% physical type lesson. You can't always just split in the middle. It's like coaching, playing a game. You have to kind of smell what comes to you. You have to feel what's coming to you. And so, like you said, there's no use just throwing her, on the rubber if there's something under that is kind of cooking and bubbling that we need to address first. So I love that you brought that up, Courtney, because I think it's something that if we just spend a little more time in it and dealing with it, it's vulnerable. It can be uncomfortable, but part of this game is getting comfortable with your discomfort. So let me ask you this: in those moments, in the big moments when you were out there with the College World Series facing the best of the best, did you feel in the pocket? Did you get nervous, excited before games? Like emotionally, how were you at the highest level of play? How was it for you?
So for me, and it's crazy to even say, but from when I was young, first time I ever took the mound to the last time I ever took the mound, I had butterflies before every single game. And I would get nervous if I didn't. I really would go, okay, this is about to be really bad, because I never had the confidence of I'm going to go in and I can beat them. You know what I mean? There was always that what if. And I think that's really important for people in general to remember. That's why we play the game, because anything can happen on any given day. It was not guaranteed that I was going to beat, the 250 ranked team in the country. There was no guarantees. What happens if I had my worst game of the day and they had their best? So every time I took the mound, there was always butterflies, and I prepared for each game in the bullpen the same, no matter who my competition was. And I think that I didn't learn those things until I was older. Obviously, I didn't have, and I don't want to say I didn't have great coaches, but I didn't have the knowledge, and my coaches didn't have the knowledge that we have now. It was just two guys that had played baseball, and they were coaching us for fun, I guess. I really don't know, because they had real jobs. So, we didn't have that type of direction. But I do know that if you didn't find me in the bathroom at least once before each game, something wasn't right. So
I just think that's so important that I encourage our parents and coaches to make sure their players and pitchers watch this, because it's relatable stories, right? So even the fact that whether they have seen it or they've seen you, it doesn't matter. To know where you're at in the game and to hear this testimony and to realize that they can say, wow, that is me like every week for whatever reason that you feel. The UFC fighters talk about the worst thought in their mind, even between rounds, it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. There's certain emotions that attack you. And at that level, I mean, gosh, it's a bludgeoning sport and you're getting cut open and everything else. But the point is that there are emotions of fear. And then you'll always hear someone say at some point that if you didn't have that, there's no use fighting. There's no use playing. There's no use, you're existent. I think that's such an important subject to talk about, or at least bring up, so that players can know that it's okay. And that so what pushed you through that? Was there a consistency to your game? So meaning you had you said you had a consistent bullpen routine. So what helped you propel and push through to be able to consistently perform the way you did? What made you consistent?
Well, I just think the way that I trained was probably it. I showed up to the field for training. I did a lot of individual training rather than team training because obviously I threw a lot of innings. So for during the week for practice time with the team, I didn't see the team as often, but I did a lot of individual training. I did spins. And I think it's important for pitchers and players to understand that you need to work on your craft more than once a week, even if it's without a ball. Even if it's inside your house, just going through the physical side of what you're supposed to be doing to make you great. I think that was what I did. Actually, I had a girl who she was a freshman when I was a junior. She sent me a message recently, and I don't remember this, but she said that we would do spins in the hallway of the dorm, even after a 4-hour practice. And I really don't remember this, but apparently I did it with her, and she was calling to thank me for that. And I think that's really important too, is, sometimes you may not be feeling it. Why don't grab a teammate instead of a coach? Because, your coach is going to be like, I'm tired, whatever it may be. Grab a teammate. They can help you out. So working on your craft all the time doesn't mean you have to go outside for 2 hours. You can spend 10 to 15 minutes in the house doing spins, or, throwing a ball up against the wall to work on your defensive skills, or, air swinging in the house. Whatever it may be, but whatever it is you do, you need to make sure that you're giving it some time every single day. Not 30 minutes, not an hour, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes. But for me, when it came down to my bullpens, I think where I really figured it out is I would throw the first inning in the bullpen. And you'll hear or you'll see a lot of pitchers, a lot of times, they'll either win it they'll lose the game in the first inning, or they'll lose the game in the last inning. You're not going to see a lot of pitchers lose it in the middle, because at that point they're kind of cruising. So it's that first pitch of the game that sets the tone. We don't want to throw a ball for the first pitch of the game, but we also don't want to get to the last inning and not know how to close it out. So there's this little saying that I tell the kids all the time. I'm like, at the beginning of the game, we're slicing the pig. At the end of the game, we're bringing the bacon home. So it's slice the pig, bring home the bacon. So we got to make sure that we do our job from first pitch to last pitch. And I learned that if I was going to lose, I was going to lose in the first inning. I could shut you down at the end, no problem. But if I was going to lose, it was going to be in that first inning. So I would throw my first inning in the bullpen. And typically, first batter of the game is going to be a slapper. So I'd throw to a slapper, first batter. Second batter might have been a contact hitter, somebody who might bunt. Third batter could have been a power hitter. Whatever it was, by the time I was thrown in the bullpen, we typically had the lineups. So I know who I was facing, first 3 batters. And really that's where I saw a change. So, my routine before the game and my preparation before the games going in, because we played a lot of games on the road. And so we didn't have series the way the kids are playing now, but I would prepare during the week, and then before every game, whether my bullpen was 5 minutes or 20 minutes, depending on how many games we had played that day, that is the one thing that was consistent, was I would throw the first inning in the bullpen.
One of the things I love about our players in the South is when a lot of them talk about skinning the pig and bringing home the bacon, they've actually done it. So out here in California.
I haven't, but
I was going through my mind. The other one was our coach Holly, who's a vegetarian. I was thinking skin the potato and bring the French fries home, because she, that
maybe she's definitely not going to be eating any bacon.
I love that. I love the fact that you addressed the first inning and the last inning. Coach Mike White talks about more games are lost than won. I explained to some of our coaches on a regional meeting that if you understand this mindset pocket that we talk about and try to create for our coaches, that you really just wait for the other team to either implode, mismanage, or something, and then you just execute. It's that you don't have to do all this work and being so perfect. You just allow it to unfold, because so many people don't know how to manage themselves, their thought process, observe and make decisions. It's all about the expectations in a game, and then the reactions when things don't go a certain way, and then everything starts to unfold. So I love the fact that we talk about the first inning and the last inning. The scariest 6 outs in softball, and therefore the most exciting in championship play, where you hear crowds going crazy from the other side of the park, it's always in the last 6 outs. And when you have let's say a lower food chain team up 6-4 against a top whatever, it's that nervous time of them. All of a sudden they're excited, they're winning, they're feeling great, they pound, they jump ahead first inning, and the last 6 they start thinking, oh no, we have to get 6 more outs. And then you start to see the mentality change. Instead of like, who cares if we lose? Like, let's just keep going at them. Let's keep stealing. Let's keep whatever. Let's just keep going. And if we lose, so what? Let's just go. But to worry about the win or to go to the next bracket, and it slips away. And then I'll be honest with you. That's not the satisfying part of coaching for me, is either beating that other coach or a vulnerable player. It's really the process of what our players go through and what it got to take there, or what it took to get there. But I think that's a really, really good point, and I love the fact that you brought that up. Did you throw loose? Would you describe yourself? Did you throw loose? Because you threw a lot of innings. So how were you injury-wise? Were you relatively injury-free? I mean, how was that relationship?
Yeah, I really was. I never had any arm issues. Obviously, we had good trainers taking care of my arm, but I never had any arm issues. My freshman year, I had a hip issue, but that wasn't from softball. That was from doing something on that side. And then, but after that, really the only other thing I had is I had a pulled muscle in my stomach one time. But I think I really don't know where that came from, but I never had any arm issues. I always took care of my arm in regards to ice and heat. And I know there's some juggling information on that. Should we heat? Should we ice? What should we do? That kind of stuff. Obviously, I don't want to get into any of that, because I've seen both sides. I've seen people say you don't need to if you're not having any pain. And then I've seen people say you need to, even just because we're going to take care of the muscles. But I was really, really lucky. I didn't really have any issues, but, I did throw a lot of innings, but I didn't throw a lot of innings that were outside of gameplay. But with that being said, obviously when you throw in a game, the mind you just have to focus a little bit more. So I don't know if throwing, 300 pitches during the week is as tough as throwing 300 pitches on the weekend. Because I didn't do that part. I didn't throw during the week that much. I did a lot of more short stuff. But I think that as a pitcher in general, when I teach, and I think the best pitchers you see, they're very flowy. That you don't see a lot of your dominant pitchers. They're not super tight. Everybody stays real loose. And again, if you line up 10 pitchers, I don't think any of the dominant pitchers are going to have everything look exactly the same. I can name names and every one of them is going to look different. So staying loose and making sure your body's in good shape, your core specifically is in good shape is a big deal for a pitcher. There's some things that you don't want to do as far as weights and certain muscles. You want to take care of those. So I think it's important to make sure you know what you're doing, but staying loose and fluid is kind of an absolute when it comes to a pitcher for me. You don't want to be jerky because that creates a lot of jerkiness in the body, which the muscles don't like that. We like everything to be smooth and flowy. So, and aggressive and strong, but smooth and flowy will get you the speed you're looking for.
We did a podcast or a one-on-one yesterday with Nairi White, and she used one of her dad's phrases, and that is powerless effort versus effortless power. And that's one of the reasons why I like to do things with her and how her motion looks. Yesterday's discussion was really about fluidity and sequences, as she calls it, from first point to the last point, how it all kind of puts together. I believe it's just an area that if we just spend more time thinking about it, a little self-awareness of how we're putting the pieces together, the expression of all the pieces that we've learned, whether it's hitting or pitching, that you start to get to that, at some point it'll get old, but when something looks like that, to me, it's something that not only do I want to watch, I'll pay to watch. And I don't go somewhere else. When something is in front of me that is drawing me in or inspiring me or is entertaining or has a beauty to it. I mean, it's what we do when there's a certain entertainment aspect towards it. So I love the fact that you brought that up as well. The one thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about and to give our pitchers something to work with as far as developmental wise, because all of these things are so important that I wanted to think about. But you and I quickly kind of discussed, what happens when your bread and butter, whatever that is, your best pitches, they're not working. Or so many times, like I explained to our coaches, your pitchers have a screwball, a curveball, a drop and a rise, and a changeup, one off speed pitch. And then I watch them call pitches. The first two changeups bounce or they're not effective. No confidence in that pitch. Now everything comes in same speed. Now this pitcher is going to try to execute this for, let's say, 5 innings in most of our games, except for championship play. And you just see the pressure because it's timing. And so, there's not this confidence or an ability to take something and be deceptive with it, even though it's not your best pitch. So for you, example was what were your pitches that were not your bread and butter, but were still important for you to be able to mix in so that the batter would be more deceived by your bread and butter pitches?
So bread and butter for me were rise, screw, change. I could live on those 3 pitches, and I think that I had the most confidence in those. And then curveball, didn't like it, but I could throw it. And drop ball, never threw it, but I had it. So I think a lot of times people forget that you still need to work on the ones that aren't your favorite. And we do it all the time in lessons. And obviously my daughter's a pitcher. We do it all the time with any pitcher. Is obviously you spend a little bit more time on the pitches you're going to throw the most because you want to dominate with those. But I think what you said is important. Your bread and butter is either not working or everybody knows that's what it is. So they're sitting on it. So you have to be able to go some other direction. So when I'm working with pitchers, I tell them you need something that's dominant left to right, and you need something that's dominant up or down, and you have to have an off speed. Plain and simple, you have to have an off speed. So for me, there's actually one when we talked about, what are we going to talk about? There was a game I was playing LSU. I was at a regional. Their best hitter was up. Ashley Ducote was her name. Third baseman, All-American. I had thrown to her probably, 12 times because we played them so much. And she knew what I was going to throw her. And all of a sudden, I got a drop ball called because I didn't call my own game. All of a sudden, the drop ball signal went down. I stepped off the mound thinking, nope, she got that wrong. There's no way they're calling that. So I took a deep breath, got back on, and she dropped the drop ball signal again. I'm thinking, have they lost their mind? I can't throw this. I haven't thrown this. I haven't even warmed this up. So that's the type of situation where this is perfect. Okay, she doesn't know it's coming. So I threw it and struck her out looking. And it was one of those things where I'm like, wow. So I think the important piece of this is I worked on it, but confidence wise, I didn't throw it that much. So I knew I could, but I never was really put in that situation to where I had to throw it all the time. So when you go around and you see pitchers, kids are rise ball pitchers or they're drop ball pitchers, they're curve ball pitchers, they've got a great changeup. People, they label kids when it comes to that. This is what she is. But if you can, and I think a good example too is Rachel Garcia. I was listening to something and she said, everybody knew I had a great rise ball and I wanted to develop a great drop going, I think it was between her junior and senior year, which whenever those years might have played out. But then you watched her at the College World Series last year and she was also throwing a drop. So she changed herself dynamically. She could go up or down. She throws super hard. She had a changeup. So I think being able to have a good arsenal of pitches, you know what your 3 are going to be. You should pick 3 and dominate with those 3, but have the others, whether you use it as a setup or, and that would be, you're predominantly screwball, but you want, she's sitting on your screw or she's fouled off a couple of screwballs. We can't go change because you don't like that either. So we can't go up because, whatever it may be. So let's go out let her see something different, and then come right back in. So use it as a setup, or use it as, okay, well, my best pitch isn't working. I can go with this. And I had that situation happen before too. I was playing in a game. They weren't swinging at rise balls, so we had to switch. I ended up throwing drops one time for a whole game. So
which game was that? Do you remember?
Yeah. We were playing Wisconsin, of all people. We should have dominated. They were beating us 1-0. And then we did come back and win, but it was one of those things. I was on the mound, and I vividly remember going, why are they not swinging at my rise ball? They are not swinging. What is going on here? So I came into the dugout. I'm like, look, we're going to have –
Were they in take mode? Were they seeing something?
They were in take mode. Take mode. I'm thinking, I'm throwing you a low rise. What are you doing? So
they're taking the chance that you may throw a strike down the middle, but they're looking. They might have said, "This is how my mind works, right?" Because if you look at her last 30 pitches, rise balls, how many of them were strikes? She'll bring the low rise in 3-2, 3 out of 30. But this bread and butter is looking like a strike and it takes off. So whatever you see, don't trust it. Just don't swing. We had to do it against Amanda Freed, and it's a little tricky mind play. But look what it does. You're sitting there asking, because that's all I'm looking for as the other coaches. We're watching the pitcher. Is she asking herself, why aren't they swinging at this, right?
Yeah. I was literally going, why are they not swinging? So I came in the dugout. I'm like, we're going to have to go down because they're not swinging up. And so we went down, and then all of a sudden they started swinging. I was like, heck yeah. So, but my drop was the last pitch I learned. It wasn't a pitch that I used all the time, but I still threw it. And so my thing would be to pitchers and to, people that are helping the pitchers out is you still have to spend some time on the pitch that you may or may not throw ever in a game. Because it's important, because at some point you're going to run into a situation where they're either not swinging or they know what's coming and you've got to go a different route, or you need to set up your bread and butter by going the other route as well. So pitch calling, I think, is super important when it comes to winning a game for pitchers. I think it's important for pitchers to know what pitch they would like to throw. I'm not going to get into the debate of whether coaches or athletes should call their own game. I'm not doing that. I think that's for everybody else to figure out. But I think it's really important for pitchers to know, okay, I should throw this in this situation and I shouldn't throw this in this situation. I think it's important for them also to read the batters. You're gonna come across batters that are going to try to intimidate you with their eyes, and I think you need to be able to do that with your eyes as well. But know that physically you can throw any pitch in your arsenal and have 100% confidence in it, because you're going to need it at some point.
I think part of that, Courtney, and you've described it a few times, it's how you feel about certain pitches. So you feel confident with your best pitches. You feel certain things. I think it's important for our coaches to understand that we want to recognize that our pitchers feel certain ways and don't deny those feelings. But when we are trained professionally, we have to look at our pitches like tools in a toolbox, and the tool has to fit the situation. You may be more comfortable with a crescent wrench, but you need a screwdriver. The crescent wrench isn't going to work in this situation. But I grew up with a crescent wrench. I've always had it in my hand. That's a feeling. I get that, but you're not going to get the screw in with that. And so if you think about the most common pitch to me is the changeup. That's the one I see abandoned first. It's a theoretical second pitch that pitchers learn, but then realistically, it's the first pitch that coaches abandon when it's not working. So I am a 13-year-old or 14-year-old student of yours. I walk up. I don't have a lot of confidence in my changeup, and in 1 to 2 sentences, I walk up and say, "Coach Courtney, my coach said he's going to call this changeup this week because we're facing one of the top 10 teams. What do I do with
it?" You throw it, because you have to show it.
Uh-huh.
Whether it's a great pitch or not, you have to show something off speed. Because you said earlier in our conversation is they bounce the first one, or they bounce the first 2, and then we go speed the next one. Okay, everybody can sit on speed, even if it's 70. They can sit on speed. You continue to throw that pitch in the game, because who knows, maybe in the 3rd inning, it shows up. And then you're good to go, innings 3 through 7. But you got to throw it. Keep trusting yourself. And I tell kids in lessons this all the time. Okay, if we throw 10 change-ups and 7 of them are great, we've got to make those other 3 better, to where at least they are, they'll swing coming out of your hand. It's got to be a believable pitch. So keep throwing it, keep practicing it, keep training, keep believing in it, and eventually it's going to show up. And if it doesn't, you tweak and you figure out how to make it better. by making a small adjustment rather than a big one.
In development, I'm into the up and down all around, as you know, above and below the ring. In games, unless it's just really ineffective, I would suggest just throw it low, just bounce it, let them see the
Throw
top.
it low, yeah.
Michelle Smith, that's the one thing that I really take away from her knowledge is let the batter see the top of the ball. The lower it is, they only see the top. Again, there's anxiety levels and the same thought process going in a lot of underdeveloped hitters that changes speeds. To take the pressure off of the pitcher when she's worried about it not working. I said, how many batters like it when you pull the plug on the batting machine and they don't know it? Or all of a sudden you shut the off and they're hitting 63 and then the ball just kind of comes out. They look at you like, what the heck are you doing? So think of the favor that you're doing any pitcher or any hitter or team when you've, in your mind, not made it okay to throw the off-speed pitch. So find a play. I think that off-speed pitch, that changeup is the first one. Not only bounce it, but, if I turn my body kind of like a right-handed batter, you can bounce that change in the other batter's box over there, and the batter's going to naturally lean over it and look. Now, what do you got? You come back with that screwball that is your bread and butter. So you've widened the plate out another 3 feet with a ball, but the spectrum of vision takes the batter's eyes out there. And again, you can watch batters to see how they think in between pitches, and most of them don't have this process. Boop, you zip that in. Plus, let's say it's not fast enough, so you're throwing like a 33-mile-an-hour changeup. And then that you go again. I have pitchers of like, oh, no, it's too slow, and they kind of like have this. I say, too slow means it puts me to sleep. So put me to sleep with 33 in the dirt, 7 feet outside, and then your 56 seems like 59. And it's just that little bit of zip. And I guess we can go to the other side of that, right? Like if your off speed is your bread and butter and you don't feel you throw hard enough to keep a batter honest inside, well, don't try to throw an inside strike. Throw off the plate inside. Get her to straighten up. Get her to back up off the plate. And then your curveball break into that outside corner. It widening the plate is so important because I've said this before, the game is about home plate. Like who wins home plate? Pitchers dominate it, hitters dominate it. I mean, home plate is the most precious part of this game because she who dominates it and owns it is usually going to come out, in a pretty good situation. So whether it's the drop, the rise, know how to miss good, and then have the confidence in what you're learning, not so much emotional confidence that you can put your third and fourth and fifth best pitches somewhere you can set up your 1 and 2. So you're working on developing 4 or 5 pitches, but really bread and butter, as you said, 3. That's it. 10 and 12-year-olds, Courtney, like what are your pockets of students? This will be the last thing we talk about is, 10s and 12s, 10 to 13. Like what's the priority development there? Maybe 13 to 16, 16 to 18. Like do you have kind of a pocket of development for your younger kids, what you like to see them concentrate on and how they progress?
Yeah, so when they come into me and they're younger, it's obviously all about mechanics. The first 2 pitches we're going to learn are fastball, changeup. Mechanically, I think they're pretty similar other than release point. Because like we talked about, the changeup has to look like everything else. So when it comes to mechanics, I don't care if you're 18 or if you're 10. When you show up to a lesson with me, we're going to make sure your mechanics look good. Because in my opinion, mechanics keep you from getting hurt, and they help you learn new pitches, and it also helps you throw harder based on whatever your body can do. And I tell this to parents all the times too. When somebody looks at Kelly Barnhill, for example, they're like, well, she's a little shorter, but she still throws hard. I'm like, well, some kids are born to throw hard. That's just how it goes. So what we do is we want to make sure that our mechanics are good to where we can get everything we can out of your body. And that's our goal, is to get everything we can out of your body. So between 10 and 12, we're working on mechanics, making sure everything is right. We're working on change-ups. And then once we kind of have our change-up down, then we can move on to something else. If you're learning 5 pitches in a year, you might want to question what's going on. I think realistically between 10s and 12s, I think kids are learning. Do I really want to be a pitcher? Do I want to put in this much work? Is it worth my time? Do I want to do something else? Do I want to focus on a different position? So between 10 and 12, mechanics, speed, and off speed for sure. And then, I think each kid has their own kind of rhythm and their body does certain things. So not every single student should learn in an order. It shouldn't be fast, change, curve, drops. It shouldn't be that way. It should be based on what they do well and what their body is going to do well. You're going to find kids that they tend to lean over when they land. Okay, drop might be better for you. Or you got kids that fall to the right. A screwball might be a little better for you. Or you can go the opposite way and teach them the curve because it's going the other way. But between 10 and 12, we're working on mechanics and fastball for sure. And I like to try to get them 2 or 3 spinny pitches. And I think their progression is based on how often they work outside of lessons as well. And then once you hit 14s, you're back to 43 feet. There's an advantage to 43 feet because you've got more room for the ball to break. You've got more room for the changeup to die when it gets to the plate. So I love 43 feet. I love when the kids get to go back. Plus, it's the farthest back you're going to go. So there's no more, we don't have to learn anything different. We don't have to adjust our release points and that kind of thing when we hit 43 feet. So once they hit 14s.
So huge. That's such a big point. What you just said about what 43 feet does as an opportunity with what you just said, more room to break and more room for off-speed pitches to be harder to judge. Not, wow, let's see how hard we can throw. Remember, to get the ball from where my fist is to a batter, from here back past the batter with speed is an extremely hard thing to do. And
it
so
is.
These pitchers that are constant, yes, home run and fastball. That's what's the most glamorous parts of our game. We love to watch the home run.
It is.
As a fan, the way that I play the game, I get it. But we're talking about winning pitching. We're not talking about pitchers that just throw pitches. And so the 43 feet aspect of using it to your advantage. So here's the question to our coaches and pitchers. Are you doing that? Is your mindset aligned with being successful at 43 feet? Or have you well-intended, but your mindset has been to blow the ball past batters at a greater distance, which it doesn't make sense unless you've got that thing that's special out of your hand. And you can usually see that. We did one with Taryn Alvello a couple of weeks ago. So that ball was coming out of her hand at a pretty early age, something pretty special. But you're talking about a very small percentage of players. So thank you for mentioning that, because that's that pocket maybe for the 14 and under player to now get the experience, see what's happening with the pitch, go get that work experience, right? Not that you have to win everything, but all right, put it over the middle. She hits a home run. Throw it down low and away, she hits a ground ball. Even if it went through the hole for a base hit, you lost the game. You got the ground ball. Pitching the contact, right?
Yeah. Pitching to contact is huge. And that goes back to winning with your worst pitch sometimes. If your stuff is not great, pitch to contact. Let your defense help. That's why they're there. You don't have to strike everybody out. Quite frankly, I'd rather you throw 3 pitches in an inning than 10 and strike out 3 batters. I want less stress on your arm. So pitch to contact sometimes is where it's at. And I think if people will do that, stay around the plate and work their pitches, those strikeouts are going to come. So
it's been getting ahead of the count and then knowing how to expand it or doing whatever. So whether you've got those spins that are deceptive, sounds like that was a big part of your game, or just knowing where to place the pitch. Remember, pitchers use the anxiety level, and also I'm going to say the training, the type of development a lot of hitters go through, which again is very physical. Use it to your advantage. Because if you pick up what the batter is telling you, an extreme amount of confidence, the number 4 batter that wants to win the game, bounce that changeup. Don't throw it for a strike. Her long arms are going to reach it. But then the anxious batter that's result-based and worried about what's going to be said to her, or failure isn't okay in her minds if you don't get a hit, she's going to expand her strike zone. A few of them are going to take good pitches to hit. You don't want to live in there, but they're going to expand their strike zone. So just take what they're giving you. I think that is so important. I think that's a great point. Now let's go to 16s to 18s. So even your daughter, Britton, right, who has just been a pleasure to work with. And again, the experience for me has just been so great because it's challenging with our distance. Now you talk about getting them ready for college. What are you looking for with your pitchers there and getting them set to be on their own?
So 16s and 18s, I think that's where they're really figuring out who they are as a pitcher. What are my greatest strengths? What are my best pitches? Still working on what's not your best, but the mind is a big part of the game from 16s to 18s, because they're playing. Most kids are going to skip their second year of 16s and go play 18s anyways, because they want that competition. They want to play against better hitters. So their training changes a little bit. Still at lessons and in bullpens, you should still be working on mechanics and making sure that everything's right, because if something goes haywire on that, then everything's going to go crazy. But the mental side, in that older age group is a big deal, because let's be honest, when you get to college, you're the 18-year-old low man on the totem pole playing against kids that are 22, 23, and they're stronger than you. They've been in this game for 4 years. They know the ins and outs. You know, they know the umpires. They know. So, and not to mention the fact that we have video technology that just makes the game so much harder for the pitcher standing in the circle. It's like people's eyes are on them at every single moment. But the mental side, when you get older, is to me is the most important part, because I think the game can be won or lost in the circle based on your mind. And if you can train a pitcher to calm down on the mound, have that routine no matter what, don't show your emotion. It could be going crazy in your mind, but you got to learn how to slow that down and go back to what you do well, focus on you, and kind of block everything else out. Let everything else be a blur and focus. We work a lot with big rings and small rings in our bullpens and in our lessons, especially with the older girls, is we focus, hula hoop size. They throw through the hula hoop, then we go to a smaller ring, and then we go to a smaller ring at the end. And that's blocking everything else out and focusing on what you want at the end. So that's more, we do a lot more mental training with the older kids. The physical side is definitely there, but if they can see it, then they can do it. And that's wholeheartedly what I believe that will help a pitcher out. And I know it did for me when I was playing too, because the emotion and the feel of the playing in front of 10,000 people in Oklahoma City, you don't get that every single day. So you have to train for that, and you have to put yourself in that situation when you're practicing and when you're training in the bullpen. So older girls, I think the mental side is going to be a whole lot more important than the physical side. Not that the physical side's not. You still need to do both, but I think you need to add in some mental training, because you have to remember too, if they give up a home run, some kids are going to go, oh, well, I'm not that good anymore. Or, she lost a game or whatever it may be. You have to continue to train them up and tell them you're okay. These things happen. It's the game. That's just how the game is. You win some, you lose some. And eventually you'll learn to win more than you lose if you can trust what you do.
And know that the outcome is the outcome. It's where all of the attention is. But as you learn to play the game with a professional mindset, you realize that, look, that is there. Shift your focus over, like how you said, to the rings, to what the task at hand, right? When you said, if they see it or if they're shown it, they're more likely to do it. So I would also ask coaches to think about, where are your words coming from? Are you pointing out the problem? So if you tell a hitter that they're pulling their head or they're flying open, what do they picture? They picture the problem, which is why even though we're trying to help, you don't develop confidence looking at yourself in the mirror when the dialogue in your head is what you've been doing wrong. So
right.
Way to stand tall on that. Way to keep those shoulders relaxed. Wow, look at that posture. All of that starts to build that self-imagery that I think is so important. The other aspect too, Courtney, is that our older players, our seniors in high school, are going off to college, and they're going to deal with something I call social politics. And that is that the pitching coach may have an idea on how to do things. The head coach now may be a little different than the recruiting trip. Your roommate not be like what you kind of hoped they were. And so how are you dealing with all of these real life situations when you're out living on your own? Which I love the fact that when we're empowering the 17 and 18-year-olds to be prepared to stand on their own and not call home and complain about what's going on, they can call home and explain what's going on. But, Britton's heard this, the instructions from us is to find a pocket, not just lip service, to always end the phone call with, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be okay. You've done a good job. Our coaches have done a good job. I'm prepared for this. So I'm going to go speak with my coach tomorrow and acknowledge this, or my roommate, but you're not going to have to fly out tomorrow morning to come solve my problem. Something, we know this. I can't perform, I can't pitch, I can't live, or whatever it is. But there's times when we have to create that change. But, I think that's really, really, really important. So, Courtney, we're at an hour, and we definitely, I have a responsibility. If you don't mind, we got to dive back into this. And I want to finish by just telling you that it's going to be interesting and I love this approach that you have, and then how you and I are working together with my crazy wherever approach. I came in with this beautiful daughter that you have in the middle, who's just a sponge of wanting to, be her best. And to me, the story, it's not an outcome. I'm always excited about the possibilities, but it's this combination of two worlds that we're working on right now. And I love it. And again, it's kind of an indirect working relationship, but it's a great challenge for me. I respect what you've done so much, and I haven't really mentioned that enough, but digging in a little deeper today. And it's not like, ooh, wow, the body of work and the stats. It's like we don't really put our stats, just like you said, our body of work, really, you don't even know what it is. We don't put it out there. You can find it. You're a little more notable. You got the Wikipedia. We're not there yet. But I love it. I think that you touched on some really, really good points for our people to think about. That's all we want people to do with these podcasts is give them conversation that gets them to think about how they're doing, and creates their own self-awareness. Hearing your story has been amazing. Always a little bit of insight to your background. You grew up that you weren't doing it 7 days a week and playing softball all year round because diversity. So don't knock your kids if they want to play basketball or they want to run track or they want to do something else, because in the long run, you might be saving you are saving their mileage on their body parts. So
Yes.
Just a lot of good topics. Then what I'd like to do is I'll get in touch with you, and then we'll pick some specific teaching points. I'd like to kind of transition, if you don't mind, into some things that we can now start to pass on. I really am hitting our pitchers hard with different instructors and different people from the industry that I feel have great things to say. And so it's just like recipes on cooking. There's not one way to cook spaghetti. Listen, but what you will find are these common denominators. There are words that I'm hearing in all of my conversations that you all have a certain common denominator that I actually enjoy kind of well too. So anything to say in closing to our players, coaches, anything as far as words of encouragement and where we're all headed here in the near future?
Yeah, well, I know we're all excited to get back on the field, and I know I am. I think everybody's itching to get back on the field, but just remember, take it slow. You haven't thrown a game in a while. Don't go out and try to throw 8 games in a weekend. So we don't want to do that, but just keep training, and when you're training, prepare for the game in your training time. Coaches, the kids are going to need some assistance when they get back on the field. So be sure to be kind. They're girls and they need you to love on them. And then, but other than that, we're super excited to get back on the field, and hopefully it's real soon. So hopefully.
It'll be sooner more than later, especially for you there in Texas. So.
Oh yeah, we're playing soon over here.
And, we'll get together and I'd say probably a couple of weeks, we'll knock another one out.
Okay.
Some pockets of teaching. Okay.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thanks, Coach
time.
Tony.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.